Long-term viewers of the channel will know that when it comes to airbrushing, I'm something of an amateur. In fact, the results of my first ever attempt at airbrushing are available on this channel in a video from April 2023, so at time of recording, only about 2 years have I actually been using an airbrush. So when Gaahleri reached out offering to send me an airbrush to review, I mean, I had to be honest and go, well, yeah, but you've got to make it something so simple that even an idiot like me who doesn't know what they're doing can use. And, well, that didn't seem to put them off, and they sent me this, the GHAD-39, the AD being, I assume, to do with the Advanced series, and again, I'm a bit of a noob, so having Advanced on an airbrush isn't that exotic. But I can't just sit here rambling at you about an airbrush when, quite frankly, there are far better content creators that have done a job of that. What I can do, though, is use it to build a plane and give you my honest, relative beginner feedback as to this product. So we're going to have a look at this Airfix Spitfire Vc, show you how it goes together, and then we're going to have a little look inside the box of the airbrush, and then I'm going to paint this Spitfire using just this airbrush. Actually, that's not true. As you're going to see, I do actually use a second airbrush, but I will go into the reasons why when we get there, and then I'm going to give you a little review of everything at the end of it. There should be timestamps so you can jump ahead if you like. And without spoiling too much, there is an affiliate link down below if either the Spitfire or the airbrush take your fancy. So you can pick those up using those links and support the channel if you are that way inclined. And finally, the obligatory, this airbrush was sent to me for free. However, there were no requirements for me to say anything specific, no wording that I had to mention. It was just feature it in a video. And this is me featuring it in a video. And with all that out of the way, let's start by taking a look at the kit of choice, which is the Airfix Spitfire Vc in 1/72 scale. Looking at the box first, this is standard Airfix design of the time. We've got the product code down the bottom left. We've got the image, which does not take up the full size of the box, the full dimensions. That's a newer thing. This kit, it says on the side, dates to 2020, which is also when this was released. I originally made this, you're going to see this later, I originally made this kit in 2020. This is a second one that I've got. I believe it was part of a mystery bundle. I should probably go back and watch my own video and find out, but I'm pretty sure that's how I obtained it. The shop edges have a summary of everything, the product code and the picture, and so on and so forth. There should be no surprises to anyone who's made an Airfix kit in the last decade. We're going to look at the instructions first, and they have that very familiar feel to them with the history and stats on the front page. The actual assembly instructions themselves are in a couple of colours, with red being the ones from the last step, just to show you what you've done. Nice and clear, and I've always liked these new Airfix instructions. I find them very helpful. It is worth noting that at step 12 you have to remove a bit of the fuselage if you want the canopy closed. Now that does infer an open canopy option, but I don't know why the default would be to have the canopy open. When I say the default, I mean the work that you do without having to do any modification is canopy open. You've also got down on step 23 open radiator vent things, the hatch. I can't remember what it is. I've got literally a book next to me about the Spitfire and I still can't be bothered to flick it open and look at all the parts. Anyway, optional exhausts and propeller blades for Scheme A and Scheme B. And you probably saw there as well, there's an optional drop tank and an option for wheels up, as well as undercarriage down. 31 is the pilot, so yes, there is a pilot included should you wish to include a pilot in your cockpit rather than just leaving it empty. The colour callout is at the end of the instruction booklet, Scheme A being this United States Army Air Force example from North Africa. That's the one on the box, it's the one with the teeth, and you can see there it's got a separate over-painted roundel on one side, both top and bottom. And then Scheme B is from the South African Air Force. I am actually going to show you another Spitfire in... I say another Spitfire? I'm going to show you my previous example that I built in 2020. We're going to do a little bit of a comparison there as well. Meaning this is a kit review, an airbrush review, and a nostalgic look at how I've progressed over 5 years. Isn't this exciting? Anyway, the decal sheet. This is by Cartograph, exactly as you'd expect from Airfix. There's a reasonable number of stencils considering it's quite a small aircraft. Obviously you don't have to put them all on if you don't want to, and I certainly didn't 5 years ago. I will this time. And the registration is absolutely fine. There are no defects on this decal sheet that I can see whatsoever. Onto the plastic parts then. We have 4 sprues. This is in Airfix's slightly older light grey plastic rather than their newer darker grey formula. We have the cannons moulded onto the bottom of the wings, however they are supported by these bits of sprue, which is fantastic, so they're not going to fall off anywhere. The fuselage has the cutout for the nose, because you can have, say the nose for the chin, you can either have the tropical filter or not. This kit has an option for both. Also has an option for clipped wings or non-clipped wings. They are full wings in both schemes for here, but there has been a subsequent release of this tooling with a clipped wing version. We do have one slightly loose part. Thankfully we're not using it here because that's the non-tropical filtered chin, and we have multiple propeller blades as well, as you saw in the instructions. There's almost no flash and the detail is fine. It's nice recessed panel lines, very, very smart, very, very nicely done. And clear parts, we're leaving them in a separate bag, but you can see that there is indeed a separate open canopy option as well as the closed one, rather than you having to cut anything up. So to summarise then, tool date 2020, 73 parts according to the side of the box. We have 2 decal schemes, and at time of recording, which is right at the end of May 2025, the recommended retail price is $11.99. It's a Series 2 Spitfire rather than, for example, the Mark 1, which is a Series 1. It is 73 parts. I personally feel that that price is fine. Just as Series 2 prices go upscale with it, but generally speaking, Airfix will keep this in line with other Series 2s for the foreseeable future. Construction, of course, begins with the interior, and we have this incredibly tiny part making its way to the carpet monster. Thankfully, I did retrieve it. This is the bulkhead behind the pilot's seat, and there is this angled piece which supports something or other, which has to very carefully go in. I must say that, considering it's a Spitfire and I could probably make it without even looking at the instructions, tweezers were my best friend for this build. It's just one of those that has a lot of small parts. The oxygen tanks go on here in between these 2 grooves, which is how 2 of the bulkheads are secured. I personally chose to put everything on the port side, other than there's some bottles on the starboard side, and then glue it together after it was painted. You don't have to do it this way. I just personally found it easier to paint this way. But you see here, everything just fits together really nicely. There were absolutely no fit issues. I don't think there was a single part of this kit that put up any resistance. It was an absolute joy to build the entire way, and I was thoroughly enjoying the afternoon that I spent building the interior. And actually, it's quite a good job that I have another one of these kits available, because quite frankly, there's never going to be a time I won't want to build it. Anyway, you can see here on the instrument panel we had some raised detail. There is a decal to go on that shortly, and the very fiddly control column goes in one of the holes. There's a few of them, but it goes in one in the middle-ish on this separate floor piece. Pilot's throne is then assembled. We have 2 pieces, one sort of a bulkheady bit and the other is the seat itself. There is a slight gap between the 2, and that is clearly deliberate because they're a different shape. It was a little fiddly gluing this. In fact, quite a lot of it for a Spitfire is a little bit fiddlier than perhaps I was expecting or remembered, but that's not to say it's difficult in any way, but just worth noting. As mentioned, this is a Series 2. It is not as easy as the Spitfire Mark 1 you may be used to. All of the sub-assemblies were then blue tacked down onto some card and blitzed with some Tamiya extra fine grey primer so that the interior painting can begin proper. As standard for me, I'm using Hataka Blue Line Interior Grey Green. This is my go-to paint for any RAF interior, and in this instance I am brush painting it. I have in the past airbrushed interiors, but generally speaking I'm much more inclined to brush paint like I am here, and I was just lining up the interior part there just to work out what's likely to be visible through the cockpit. At this time I hadn't decided whether to do canopy open or closed, so I haven't modified the fuselage. Yes, it would absolutely be better to modify the fuselage now rather than when I chose to, but I didn't want to jump into any decision making at that time, so I took that chance. And I was also still partly undecided whether I was doing a direct copy of the South African one I did before or the American one. As you can see, obviously went for American in the end. There is a single decal for the interior, which is this instrument panel piece. I'd painted the interior panel in black and it was glossed beforehand. I either use gloss black or matte black and then add a bit of gloss varnish. I don't think you need to, but I always like to. And you can also use some decal softener just to help get that detail really on there. The decal's really onto the detail there. This floor piece then goes on like that, and the other half of the interior bucket can be glued in, well, after the seat. All of this should be done when it is still wet to make sure that it is nice and neat. You don't want to be gluing things to one side and then letting it go dry and then realising it doesn't quite fit. So here, as long as the glue is still wet, you can fiddle with it and rearrange it. And then that's all closed off with this front piece. And I think the level of detail you get with this Spitfire is about right. It's not quite as detailed as, for example, the Eduard Spitfire that I featured before, but it's definitely good enough, and considering the size of the kit, yeah, more than happy with the level of detail Airfix have included. The Citadel colours contrast paint, the Basilisk, Scanum, the snake bum grey comes out. This is just applied to all of the detail inside. It's thinned with water, and then any excess is taken off with a cotton wool bud. Generally speaking, you don't need that much, so I do thin this, and I've had this paint years and used it so much and it barely runs out just because I use it so sparingly, as in, it's so thin. This just adds a little bit of texture, adds some shadowing, and makes the entire interior just look that little bit better when you're brush painting it. And on that, the fuselage halves can be stuck together. You'll see here that there is a pin at the very nose. In fact, it fell out when I tried to line the fuselage halves together. This pin is, of course, for the propeller blades, and you should be careful not to apply too much glue around that area, because if you do, you will not have a spinning propeller. Of course, it may not interest you. You may just want to glue it shut anyway. But where possible, I always at least attempt to make moving parts move. Whether they're successful or not, well, you'll have to wait and see. As noted in the unboxing section, there are two wing tip options available on this kit. You have the full tip and you have the clipped wing. The full tip is what is needed for both of the schemes here, but there is a new version with the clipped wings, which I also have and will make at some point. But the difference between the two is nice and simple. You glue in this Wilwell piece, just make sure you get the cutout for the undercarriage leg in the right place, otherwise it looks a bit silly. You glue those in, and then you choose your top wing of choice. It's always good to see variety like this included in a kit. Makes it feel better value for money for me, because you could have aftermarket decal sets available, which one of them may be clipped, one of them may be full, and it's nice to be able to get one kit to do the whole lot with. But as I said, we don't need the clipped ones in this instance, so they're going to be put in my spares box. And it's at this point of any build where I feel the kit really comes together. We've got wing assembly, we've got fuselage assembly, they're going to be joined, and then we have all of the extra stuff. We have the tail, the rudder, and pretty much anything up to the point where primer is going to be applied. So it's at this stage you really get an impression of what the end result will be, and it's always one that I enjoy. I like just line all the bits up, glue it all together, and go, yes, look at this, I've got a plane. The way that the horizontal stabilisers go on this particular kit is quite good. There's no pin that carries across, but they're moulded in a way which means you can't get them wrong, which is very helpful, so you can't have them upside down. And theoretically, you could have the rudder in a position, you could have it turned. I didn't, and the instructions don't tell you to do that, but the way that it's assembled means you could. Another bit of advice is when gluing the tropical filter on, just be a little bit careful, because again, where the glue at the top goes could interfere with the spinner. Some very careful glue placement is required. And now I have to make a decision as to whether I'm doing Scheme A or Scheme B, because as you see, Scheme A only has the 220mm cannon, whereas Scheme B has the 4. So these blanking bits, blank barrels, I don't know what they are, but the bits that go where the guns otherwise would go can now be glued on, confirming, if the thumbnail and the shot at the beginning of the video didn't give it away, that I am indeed doing the USAAF scheme. We then have the tail wheel and under wing furniture all assembled at this time, which is essentially the completion of the assembly phase of this kit. I do just want to mention the radiator flap as well. Sometimes there's a small indentation that shows you where to place it if you want it open, and then you remove it if you want it closed, for example. This kit does not have that. If you want it open, you just sort of glue it there and hope, and if you want it closed, you glue it roughly where it should be closed. That's the only thing which feels a little bit lo-fi on this kit. As mentioned earlier, the canopy can be done either open or closed, and you get separate pieces for that. I filed down the plastic, obviously dry fitted many times to make sure I got it spot on, and then glued the canopy at this stage. Sometimes I will just plug the hole and hand paint the canopy afterwards, but I'm using some airbrush ready paint, so I decided, as it's a fairly simple canopy, to mask it and paint it all in one. And here's the masking tape that I was going to use and then didn't. We interrupt this riveting Spitfire content for a look at the Gaahleri GHAD-39. This arrived in a sturdy cardboard box, and then inside is this bubble wrapped shiny, incredibly shiny box. It's horrendously shiny. You can just see me, you can see the background, you can see the light I'm using. Yeah, it's very difficult. Anyway, it confirms here it's for fine to medium work, and it has two nozzles, the 0.35 and the 0.5mm. My previous airbrushes have used 0.3, I want to say, and I'm currently using one with a 0.2. I'll mention that shortly. But here is the other information. You've got the product name and the company address and whatever. So yes, they are made in China and based in China, and it's an authentic airbrush, and you can tell that because of the sticker. This is the box within the box then, which is this lovely black, chic black design. I really like it. I didn't show you, I will try and get a picture up, but there is actually an image on that back of the box that is a breakdown of everything, really, really handy. The Dear Customer thing and the starter's guide, or the quick start guide, should I say. This, as I'm going to mention later, this is where the money is, people. I am a complete amateur with airbrushes, and if this were my first airbrush with this full guide telling you how to disassemble, it would have made my life so much easier. And of course, if you're not English speaking, the guide will probably cater for you, as long as you speak in one of the other languages that are on the sheet. The entire back, by the way, is the same thing, but in other languages. Once inside, you get rid of this foam, and we have some spare parts. Again, my previous airbrush did not have any spare parts, but yes, some spare O-rings and seals and whatever. It does tell you there's sort of an instruction thing as well. And again, look how ridiculously shiny these cups are. And both the cups have lids, which is, again, different for me because I've usually had a small one without. We have a little cover over the needle end, but this is the airbrush itself. Rather smart, I must say. Again, I don't really know that much about airbrushes, having only ever used one brand prior to this, but it has a very smooth feel to it. It's dual action, of course, so down applies air, and you pull it back to apply the paint, and you have the adjustments on the back as well. And here is the spare needle. So it's got the 0.35 installed as standard, which I think is correct. It's what it should be. And the 0.5 if you really have a big job to do. And there is also a little pack of Gaahleri lube, which I assume is meant for the airbrush. It does tell you where to apply in the instructions as well, in case you didn't see. My limited airbrush experience so far has been with Fengda, and you can see here the 186K, which is currently my main airbrush, which has a 0.2mm nozzle, and I've also got the 183K, which you will see later in the video as well. And here's how they stack up in terms of size and things like that. So to test the new GHAD-39, I will be pouring some Vallejo colours into it. This is a model air box set, which is, of course, as you can see here, for desert scheme or Mediterranean theatre of operations aircraft. I really like these sets because they often come with something like this, which is a little booklet explaining the colours, what they would be used for. This is just RF in general, and it's got a tiger moth right in the middle, so you get to paint a desert aircraft and still see a tiger moth. Anyway, the bottom is, of course, going to be azure blue. I say of course, they used a couple of colours, but that's what I'm going for. The whole aircraft has been primed in some Citadel black, because that's what I had available, and I tend to do black basing. and then the blue is poured in, and with the 0.3 nozzle, the Gaahleri airbrush could be tested. This was genuinely the first time I had sprayed with this, and yeah, it feels pretty good, I must say. You have quite a small coverage area, which is what you want. Obviously not as small as the 0.2 that I've got in the 186K from Fengda, but for all general kit building, I think a 0.3 is absolutely fine. I will be masking the colours, but I just wanted to get general coverage up to the line first, and then kind of wider coverage from there. I specifically went for a Vallejo box set because that is generally what I use. They're my go-to paint if possible, and choosing this kit meant I knew that I had Model Air paints for it. I know what Model Air paints feel like inside my Fengda. Therefore, a good way of testing the Gaahleri is just to see what it does with my normal equipment, rather than something special. And the only variable is the airbrush. The azure blue is then masked off, and we have middle stone, which for some reason Vallejo put as one word. I've always seen it as middle stone, but they, for whatever reason, call it middle stone. And again, so I've just pumped some water through the airbrush. I've not disassembled it or anything. It's just been flushed with some water, and the middle stone has gone in and goes on all of the top surfaces. Again, just using the same 0.3 nozzle, which is so far the only one that I've used and the only one I'm interested in using. Again, I'm going to cover that a bit later on when we get to a convenient point for it. This paint was liberally applied over the entirety of the top surfaces, so a slight effort was made to try and avoid some of the panel lines. I didn't do a very good job of it. I've never been particularly good at that because I've, well, never really practiced it. But I'm okay with this looking nice and smart because I'm not one for weathering in general. And besides, this video is a good excuse to use the airbrush rather than a good excuse to weather a Spitfire. The masking technique that I am using for the dark earth is the blue tack worm method. This just involves masking out the colours with little blue tack strips which somewhat resemble worms, and it's fine as long as you don't leave the plane outside and it gets eaten by a blue tack bird. And then the dark earth can be painted over the relevant panels. I didn't do anything fancy like cover up full panels or have any sort of clever system. I just looked at the instructions and went, right, this one's brown, finish that panel. Which one's brown next? That one, cool. And then do that panel, and just kept on doing that until happy that the camouflage pattern was correct. Then have the incredibly satisfying job of peeling all of these worms off and making sure that there's not been any overspill or anything. And no, I didn't need to do any tidy up work whatsoever to the top surfaces. That's partly because I didn't notice there was a tiny bit of brown on the top wing, but I decided to just ignore that, and as long as I don't mention it in the video, we'll be fine. But I did have to patch up something on the bottom, which we will see later. And we are now moving towards the only real error in the paint finish, in my opinion, and it's definitely something to improve on next time. This scheme is much more complicated because there's clearly been some overpainting of the original insignia, and it tells you just to mix the original colour with some black. I did this and I hate it. As you can see, this just looks way too dark and a bit silly. I'll explain my thought process at the end, but what I ended up doing for the underside was spraying over it with some of the original azure blue, so it's now a really dark circle which has been lightened. We're now going to go into the gloss varnish. This is the only time that I use a different airbrush. It's the Fengda 183K. This is my original airbrush that I used to use with a 0.3 nozzle, which broke. So I've put a 0.5mm nozzle in it, and I just blast from a distance for coverage. This is a coverage machine. And to ensure that there's no paint bleed into any varnish or something, because in the past when I had just one airbrush that had happened, I exclusively used this for varnish. With a couple of coats of gloss down, I can then add the decals. You don't necessarily need to add a gloss base when doing decals, but I have just always done so. I also find that it just helps smooth the paint colours out a little bit. To me, it just looks nicer, so that is what I've always done. The decals were done methodically, starting at the tail, working my way forwards, and none of them really had any problems. The closest was the slightly temperamental registration, just because it's a little bit spindly. But all of them were fine, and just really nice looking. I really like the colours that they've chosen, as in the blue for the roundel just looks really nice. It doesn't look too pale, as some of them often do. And it was a pleasure putting these on one evening. Naturally, the one decal that I was not looking forward to is the one at the nose, the teeth, because it has to go over complicated surfaces and it needed some decal softener to do so, and of course it's got to be exactly the right shape. As teeth go, yeah, it was actually quite simple to put on, but I don't necessarily enjoy doing things like this. Also worth noting that you can see that I didn't use tape on the cockpit, and it's just because I was having difficulty with it. I don't have a sharp blade at the moment. I need to go out and buy some more, so I actually just used some Winsor & Newton masking fluid, and it seemed to do the job. I didn't film me taking it off, and it did actually take a little bit of the paint with it, so I had to patch it up with a paintbrush, but you wouldn't necessarily notice. It's such a small amount anyway. It was mostly me being pedantic, but still worth mentioning. The entire aircraft was then matte varnished, again using the same fender because I just reserve it for just airbrush, and it means you can just cover the whole thing pretty quickly, go back 10 minutes later, turn it upside down and cover the rest of it. I have also hand painted the covers, the fabric covers for the guns. I really don't like putting decals on surfaces like that wrap around the wings, so I just didn't bother. They're probably fine. I just prefer them painted. And also you see the gun port. You obviously cover them up with the coverage, with the covers if not. I just like seeing the gun port. Anyway, with that, we have final touches on it. We have the exhausts, which have been picked out in a mix of some umber and some steel. The wheels, which have been hand painted with black and the aluminium, and the spinner. Again, this is different propeller blade assemblies for the different options. So naturally, I've gone for the correct one for scheme A. I have airbrushed some white on the spinner itself. I've hand painted the propeller blades black with the tips yellow, and I've painted the rim red. Yeah, it's a bit fiddly because now the glue has to be in the right place. You can't let the glue run and then mess up the colours, but because the colours are so contrasting, I thought that this would be the better way of doing it. But boy, does it require a steady hand with the application of that glue to make sure that nothing runs and ruins it. And speaking of steady application, to make sure the spinner still spins, you just put the tiniest bit of glue at the very tip of the peg only, and then put the propeller blades on top of that, and you'll be pleased to know, success, they do slightly turn. And with that, the kit is done. So we now need to talk about the end result of the kit and the end result of the airbrush, and then a little comparison. So we're going to do the kit first. I completely understand why people get a bit overwhelmed by the number of Spitfires that there are, and they get a bit of a bad reputation. Look, it's an incredibly famous aircraft. Everyone's going to have one in their range because it's going to get people to buy them, and in my opinion, this is the one that they should buy if they want a Mark V. This is excellent. This is a genuinely joyous kit to build. Now, I'm not a big fan of the desert scheme. I always find it can look a bit squiffy, as you're going to see in the previous one that I've done. Sometimes the yellow doesn't quite look right. I mean, it's not yellow, it's stone, but you know, it doesn't look quite right. And it's sometimes the blue, if the blue's too dark, it kind of throws everything off. If you get the colours right, and I think Vallejo have, at least to my eyes, then you're going to end up with some very impressive looking aircraft. And I have another one of these kits, as I said, to build, which will be in a non-desert scheme, and I am looking forward to it even more. This is the perfect balance between a simple kit to build, but a really good result, and I thoroughly recommend it. Absolute 10 out of 10 Spitfire build. Regarding my build of this, I mentioned that I didn't do the colour variation panels as I wanted to. In my head, I thought I could get some masking tape, cut out a little circle, and then spray that a different colour, a slightly darker one. That didn't work because I couldn't cut the tape to be nice enough because I don't have a sharp knife at the moment. And then I thought I had one of those little circle template things that I could use. I could hold that over. Well, I couldn't find that, so on the top it's just brush painted with a slightly darker version of the brown. It's the one thing which stands out as being a little bit crude, but I think it's a good first attempt. As for the airbrush, the Gaahleri GHAD-39, you know what, it's pretty good. At the moment, at time recording, they retail around the 45 quid mark. Here in the UK, obviously your prices may vary. The fenders that I'm used to have retailed at significantly less than that, and they are very much a budget airbrush. If I could go back to 2 years ago and buy my first airbrush again, I would almost certainly go for the Gaahleri over the Fender. It just feels a little bit more sturdy, and the way it's designed feels a bit more intuitive. I have since disassembled it to clean it, and it's nice and easy to clean, which helps. It has the starting guide. I cannot stress enough how good that starting guide is. Just having something like that if you're new to airbrushing. Why doesn't everyone do it? I intend to keep using my Fengda 183 for varnishing, just to keep that one clean, and I intend to keep using the 186 for the finer work, such as the mottling on German aircraft. So don't get me wrong, this is not an airbrush that I'm going to use for literally everything, but it probably will become my main airbrush for the foreseeable. I will just mention that initially it felt a bit uncomfortable because I don't know what you're calling this, but the frame extending down to the valve is longer on the Fengdas, and so my finger naturally just rests on there and it's no problem. Whereas on the Gaahleri, because it's much shorter, I felt my finger was pressing against the ribbed detail for you to screw and unscrew the adapters and things like that. So it didn't feel as natural to hold at first, and I had to adjust a little bit to accommodate. Now, I guess if this is your first ever airbrush, then that's not going to be a problem because you're going to get used to holding this with what you've got, but it would have been nicer if it was a little bit easier to hold. I do think the cup is a bit large. I don't need this much paint ever, really, especially not an aircraft of this size as a 1/72 modeler, but I do appreciate that they have a lid, because a small pot with a lid is always better than a small pot without a lid. That said, I've not actually used a lid, I just appreciate having one. So definitely something that I can recommend. If you're new to airbrushing and you've been meaning to try and take the plunge and you're not entirely sure if you should or whatever, this is, in my opinion, the best place to start, and I wish I had, because it has a good supply of information for you. So it has the fold out things, it has the parts list, because there are considerable spares available on the website, so you've got that support. It is not too expensive, so it's an affordable way of getting into airbrushing. Definitely something I would recommend. And get yourself a kit like this as well to test it on, something small, something simple. It's only 3 colours, but you know, whatever, it will give you the confidence you need to move from hairy stick to airbrush if you are interested in doing so. Obviously you need a compressor, and I've still got a Fengda one. I haven't tried any others yet, but there's no reason to. It's just, it needs to compress air, and that's all they do. But Gaahleri do them as well, and I'm sure they are fine. Affiliate links will be in the descriptions below my videos from now on, so yeah, if you're interested, you can support the channel and pick something up from them. Thank you to Gaahleri for reaching out and sending this to me. I am very appreciative. And finally, I'm aware this has been a long video, so thank you for bearing with me. I'm going to leave my old Spitfire spinning on the table as well. This was made when the kit first came out, so probably late 2020, maybe 21 if it sat around for a little bit. It was brush painted with enamels, which I believe are extra colour, and I think it's nice sometimes to do a like-for-like comparison and just see how far you've progressed. And this really highlights the difference between what I at the time considered to be a really good kit of mine to something now which is just something I threw together in a weekend with a new airbrush. So yeah, let me know. Have you been tempted to take the plunge? Have you done something like this and gone, oh yeah, I used to be rubbish? Up to you. If you've made it this far and you don't already subscribe, then please do. You can also hit the like button, which just helps this video get shared, and you can also hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when a video comes out. You can even become a channel member like the people on screen now. These lovely people pay a contribution each month, and I will often share member-only updates. So generally speaking, members are going to know first what I've got on my bench and what I've got planned. So if that interests you, not that you have to, but by all means, again, click the link below and support the channel. Thank you very much for watching. I will hopefully see you in another video or in the comment section below. Till then, keep modelling and preferably buy more Spitfires.